welcome to our second Spotlight on video as part of Fusion 5's The Bottom Line. For this edition, we're going to be putting the spotlight on predicting the future. With me today is Ben Schofield, General Manager, Corporate Performance and Data Management across Australia and New Zealand, and Philip de Harcourt, Team Leader for Corporate Performance Management. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Trudy.
As always, I'm Trudy Ellaby. I'm the GM of Brand and Marketing for Fusion 5. So I'm going to kick off with Ben. When people think corporate performance management, I think typically they're thinking about financial planning and analysis, otherwise known as trying to predict the future. How has business planning evolved over the years, and what does it look like for businesses in 2023?
Certainly from my lens, which has been over about the last decade of working in this domain, we've seen a lot of change. And one of the big aspects that's driven change from a technology perspective is the volume of data that organisations are really working with, and in terms of just the variety of sources, etc. So if we think back, really where the domain started, probably around about 25 years ago, the sophistication in terms of the tools was relatively low. But one of the greatest catalysts in that for driving the change was really the volume of data, which we all really know has been exponential really over the years. And if we look at the events really over the last couple of years, where almost every organisation on the planet has suffered some very, very significant disruption, everybody's gone looking for data to substantiate some strategic and investment decisions across their organisation. But the challenge organisations have faced is how do they collaborate and get a central view, and then make a decision within a timely amount of time. So systems have developed at an alarming rate, and there's been a lot of innovation really in the space. So it's a really exciting facet of technology to go in and work in, because almost every organisation has some relevancy in terms of business planning. So it could move from a budget to a scenario model. The elements are very significant, and they're relevant to almost every organisation.
In terms of the evolution of planning, Philip, I know you've worked in finance for much of your career. What impact have you seen the current planning and analytics practices, so the way we predict the future now, genuinely have on the profitability of businesses today?
Yes, it's interesting. CFOs and CEOs have identified planning as being in the top 3, top 5 things they want to improve upon. And we've seen this talking to them and in surveys 20 years ago, and it's been the same 10 years ago, and it's still the same. It's an area that's of vital importance to senior management. Why? It's because they know that this is one of the few areas that, if done right, they can get a competitive advantage.
Give me an example of what competitive advantage might look like if you get your planning and analytics right.
Well, I mean, it's looking at doing planning to give you making better decisions. And that might be better resource utilisation, where to spend the money. You might be looking at putting on more warehouse space or additional factory equipment. And this is the crucial thing, to be able to support the decision to go ahead with a spend or not.
Example of that, perhaps, Phil, that we've seen a lot as particularly in workforce planning or human capital management, where organisations are really wanting to understand the workforce of which that they have, perhaps a mix between full-time people, contractors, part-time people that are working inside of the office or remote from the office. Another facet to that we've seen customers really looking at is the health and safety element on that as well. So making sure that the people that are deployed on appropriate projects and organisations actually have the right credentials to be able to working on them, where organisations now are audited against those standards. Having all that information, which is controlled and centrally managed, is incredibly powerful.
It's also not easy to achieve, especially with all of the information required to do that type of analysis spread over different sources of data.
Financial planning and analytics has kind of dropped the financial bit and become planning and analytics for all. Is that fair?
Absolutely, and that's the process that we've always really advocated. It's a it's a business process, and the value around the investment and these systems is often around the collaboration across your organisation, having a central view around your drivers, your goals, your objectives, your KPIs, so that everybody's in alignment, and then being able to make change, which is integrated quite quickly, which is always really the process where we advocate, which is actually getting the whole organisation together and achieving alignment. And it's incredibly powerful from what we've seen, clients certainly that we've worked with that have taken on that journey.
Once upon a time, you'd see planning really just be financial and internal elements of your financials. But more and more, we've seen our clients start to look to external elements. For instance, if McDonald's, when they do their budgeting, one of the key things that they want each regional manager to ask for is what the local employment rate is, because they've identified is going to be a key factor on whether the branches make their budget.
Okay, that's a great example of modelling, I guess, for success, and again, predicting the future, right? This actually leads me to a question, well, more a comment that we make regularly or hear regularly, is that having all your data in one place seems to be the gold mine we're all trying to move towards. The single pane of glass, the single source of truth, 360-degree view, all of that. So given what you've just said, is getting all of your data in one place the ultimate goal? And if so, isn't that what your ERP is for?
Well,
there's nothing.
Have almost different answers to that one.
Controversial, but what's your opinion on that?
Let me go first, maybe. I'd say ERP systems don't necessarily do everything. We've seen people naturally want to get best of breed for all of their various types of software, even though there's probably a perfectly good equivalent in their ERP systems. So I think we have to live in the world that we exist in, and not an ideal world. And that the world that we exist in is there's going to be a number of different pieces of software in your organisation, and they'll be on different data sources. And there's no way around that.
My answer to that one, Trudy, would be it's actually not about the system. It's about how you manage and value your data as well. So it's about educating the organisation and acknowledging the fact that it's almost an impracticality to have all of your data in one system. But if you have your data prepared in such a way that the organisation is able to access it through multiple systems. Now, the ERP, for instance, creates it creates very, very high quality data for your organisation to leverage. That's your system of record, your transactions, your inventory moves, etc. But that's not everything in your organisation, and it actually never will be everything. There are other elements that are better serviced from other systems that are really outside that. So, my advocacy is very much around having good data management practices for the data across your organisation, which then integrate within the ecosystem of business applications that you have.
Okay, so if we're talking about using different tools to bring together all the data you have, what role does spreadsheets play in predicting the future?
Funny, we call spreadsheets the heroine of the modern workplace, but we're all addicted to it. I think the key is knowing when to stop using them.
So what's wrong with spreadsheets?
There's nothing wrong with spreadsheets, and that's the simple answer really to that question. I would advocate that there's never a place to completely replace spreadsheets in any organisation, but I think it's just to understand really the limitations of those platforms, which is typically around the ability to collaborate with multiple users, integrate large data sets, and also the IP that's in and around the rules and the drivers and of how to drive that spreadsheet, particularly when a spreadsheet gets a bit larger in terms of its complexity. Those are really the risks that the organisation needs to understand. So, a good example is of using a spreadsheet for a prototype. which I would say, or which I would totally advocate as well. And certainly a lot of customers that we work with today, they use spreadsheets through that process of advocating sort of a new model, a new design, and new thinking, where it's really fast. Almost everybody knows how to use spreadsheets. They're comfortable in using spreadsheets, but knowing when that IP certainly reaches a certain point of which that actually it needs to be protected, it needs to be shared more collaboratively across the organisation, and it also needs to be architected in a way that's really robust. That's the time to really consider alternative approaches and more enterprise-ready platforms.
We go into clients and often look at their spreadsheets, because when we're implementing a planning solution, this is generally what we're replacing. I had an aged care organisation that gave me 265 spreadsheets. 250 of them were all linked together. System held up, but they come along and they need to create a new cost centre. There's a mountain of work there. We have had a mining company give us their spreadsheets that contain over 1 million cells of formulas. We stopped counting after we got beyond 1 million. And although they work for them, I think everybody recognises that the error rate in spreadsheets is pretty high. Study after study has come in the high 80%, the whole 90% of spreadsheets have material errors in them. Not to mention, the most famous case was JP Morgan Chase, lost $6 billion basically due to a whole series of cutting and pasting errors in spreadsheets, which I think was back in 2008 or so.
That's a very painful way to learn that lesson. Okay, so you're pretty clear on the risks and shortcomings of spreadsheets. What's the alternative and why is it better?
I think, Trudy, taking those spreadsheets and thinking about, what's really great about those spreadsheets, which is, the IP that's gone in to go in and design them, which is, comes back to the sort of those rules, assumptions, and drivers that make that spreadsheet work. And then, if you lift that up and put an enterprise class database in behind it and a really nice collaborative end user interface that, the business users are able to work with that data, and the stakeholders of the organisation can be confident that policy and governance has been employed and around that, and also performance as well. Like coming back to the earlier comment that I made, and around the volume of data that organisations are working with really now, it's really significant. So performance around making these changes, sharing them across multiple users, just expands, beyond the limitations of personal productivity tools, like, for instance, Microsoft Excel. So it's just simply thinking about the right tool for the job, really as well. And humans being humans, we're not perfect. We do make mistakes, and machines can be better than humans. So I think it's the case of, really just thinking about, the repeatability, the use of this particular artifact across the organisation, and also protecting it, and then adding some scalability in and around it as well. So, that's sort of really when you want to go in and think about it. And we've developed a process of evaluating spreadsheets, which you can see up on our website. So, is to help people to understand, where you would continue to perhaps use a spreadsheet, or perhaps you might want to consider a more robust approach, which could be to use a planning solution where there's a database and a modern end user interface that enables your users to engage with that data in such a way. And again, many of those customers can actually enjoy a very similar experience, should they wish, to working with a spreadsheet, but with the right data management practices built around it, but still with the flexibility that you have in and around using a spreadsheet.
I'm going to make the observation that you're both very passionate about getting businesses to do better with the data that they have, enabling them to have competitive advantage. If there was one thing you wish people understood better about planning and analytics and corporate performance management, what would it be?
I would say the humanistic benefits of the system to actually help your whole organisation to gain alignment are just more powerful than probably what is anticipated. I think, having your organisation look at a central view of drivers, KPIs, and be supremely confident in the data that you're looking at, that it's right, is incredibly powerful. And what that drives as well is, just a culture of being very data first in your organisation, and trust that's associated with that data. And I think as part of that, it drives a lot of innovation in organisations, so they can actually think about, well, now this is what the data is telling me, now what we should be doing as well. So I think that that would be the biggest one really for me, Trudy, is the cultural change that's associated with shifting away from, often a lot of organisations are faced with actually just looking in reverse to actually start to look forward, because they have trust in these digital assets to actually make really good decisions based on the facts that are contained in the data that they're looking at, is incredibly powerful. And the organisations that I've seen that have embarked on that change, and our own organisation is actually one of those as well, where we can just see really the change in that people are now just naturally curious around looking in the data, and there's a lot of trust associated with working with that data. And I think that is an incredibly powerful value accelerator for any organisation.
I'd have to say my one thing would be the detail is not better. I'm an accountant, so I want to get to the right answer. I want to get to an exact answer. But when it comes to planning, that's not necessarily the solution. The more detailed my budget, the more wrong it will be. I think when it comes to planning, sacrificing the detail in return for speed, in return for the understanding that there might be multiple outcomes, is probably a wiser way to go. If I'm looking, if I want to find out what the weather is a month from now, I'm going to be looking for a range of temperatures. I'm not looking for a single temperature, because I know it won't be right. The same goes with planning.
Wise words and an excellent observation. So if we've got anybody who's been watching along and they've stayed with us this far and they've said, I want power, I want knowledge, I want competitive advantage, what advice would you give to those businesses on where do I even get started?
My counsel to the organisation would be, get really clear about how your organisation is driven, measured in success, and what those organisational goals are, and try and make sure that there's a clear alignment really across the organisation. So I really enjoy talking to executives really about this topic, because they love speaking about their business, around their risks, their competitive advantage, how they're going to grow, how they're going to acquire more customers as well. So having a really clear understanding of that before embarking on really any project, I think is incredibly powerful.
I'm going to take it a little bit slightly differently. The questions that I ask organisations are very simple. What if my budget is wrong? How and when do I know that? And what do I do when I discover that? And if you don't have good answers to those, and if you feel that, especially the last bit, what I do when I discover it's all wrong, then you need to be looking at alternatives.
Well, that leads me nicely to, how does one go about the process of seeking out the alternatives and then assessing them against each other for best fit?
Yeah, my suggestion would be is think about how you would measure success in your organisation, and look, that varies from client to client. But if you look at the success of a technology project, which is any technology project, it's driven adoption and continuous organisational innovation that can be measured back to your organisational goals and objectives. So that would be really my advice. And I think the challenges that we see really across clients is that organisational alignment and then value realisation as well. And if those goals are very, very clear at the onset of engaging with any service provider or looking at any solution, I think that then the value realisation will then be very, very clear as well. So doing that upfront thinking as an organisation, working with your various parts of your organisation and having that really clear view of actually how are we going to measure success of this project? What would be the value around making a change or an investment? You know, not unlike any other major strategic decision, how would you measure success? And that would be very much my advice.
I'd also say that there's an element of caution in a lot of businesses out there when they're looking at planning technology, and that's because historically it's taken a truckload of time and money to achieve anything. Over the years, that's become less and less as technology is improved to become quicker to implement, more agile. We particularly see this in areas like building integrations between planning technologies and your other source systems. We're consistently coming in and saying, well, it will only take this, and surprising clients with the speed and ease at which we can do that. And again, it's because historically it used to take a lot more effort than it does now.
The other element to add, Trudy, is, you know, it's not necessarily one system as opposed to another as well. So it's also been able to leverage those technology investments that the organisation has actually already made as well. So being really clear about, again, coming back to those organisational goals and drivers, but also looking at your technology assets around how a new solution can add value to those existing investments that the organisation has already made. And that kind of ties back into the comment that I made earlier. You know, there's no one platform that's going to service all of the organisation's needs. So, you know, understanding that really at the beginning, but looking at the investments that the organisation has been made in terms of an ecosystem of technologies, how can they be coupled together and integrated to deliver the best value to the organisation, I think is really important.
So if there are businesses out there who are thinking, yes, I want competitive advantage, I want power, I want control, and I want to do it quickly, what advice would you give them before they start their journey to choosing planning and analytics technology for their company?
Getting clear on organisational drivers, success measures, etc. But then when you're looking to select a partner, I think it's really important to evaluate the humanistic element of it as well. So a lot of technologies that are out there that are of a certain tier, they're all very good technologies, but the difference is how they're implemented, how they're embedded in an organisation, and how your partner actually works with your organisation to really get the value, so that that's brought in, that's part of the organisation, and they are on that continuous journey of just leveraging those technology assets. So, you know, my counsel would be around thinking about the human element that's in around that, so that you want to get exposed to the people that have the knowledge and the expertise, but also they're going to work very well with you and your team around being able to leverage this technology, because it's always, you know, about the business. The technology in many ways is actually the easy bit, but it's the business element and then the human intersection between the business. But those are the elements that you really want to get right.
I'd agree. It's all about the people. We've tried to develop a centre of excellence here. We have people that have had wide industry experience across pretty much every single industry that we can think of. And we are continually doing implementations and refining and improving our processes and what we deliver to our clients.
That's been fantastic, Ben and Philip. Thank you so much for your time. As always, I've been Trudy Allaby. I'm the GM for marketing here at Fusion 5. We've had Ben Schofield and Philip de Harcourt talking to us about predicting the future. And as always, if anyone's got questions, we're always here to help. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Spotlight On.